So there's testimony on HB 2002, which, wow, this bill, it basically starts to make Oregon into a sanctuary state. And when we hear people talking about sanctuary states, we hear in two cases: the abortion case, where they don't, like, the bill would say that the state of Oregon cannot go to another, like, if another state was trying to get access to see if you had committed a crime, if they didn't have abortion in, say, Idaho, and somebody goes to Oregon and has an abortion, Oregon does not have to comply with Idaho standards or have to apply, even give them any information, on what you did while you were in that state. In terms of the trans stuff, we have where a minor can basically go into any state and get care that they want. But this bill even goes further. It's about all reproductive health, right? So this bill is crazy, and the clip I have is just, it's about a lawmaker so they're basically testifying before the Ways and Means Committee on this bill, and when they this is actually talking about the abortion part and how young you can actually get an abortion in the state of Oregon without parental consent or even knowledge. So here's that clip.
Under the current law, it's not entirely clear what age a minor can make the determination to have an abortion without parental consent. Under House Bill 2002A, however, it's a minor of any age can make that determination.
So follow up. So a 10-year-old can make that decision on their own then?
No. Chair Sanchez, Senator Steiner, yes.
10-year, no. 10-year-old?
I didn't think so for that. I thought it was okay.
So you heard what she said. So the question asked was, a 10-year-old can consent to an abortion without parental consent or knowledge, and the lawyer says yes. And you can even hear, like, the Democrats in the room, like, no, you can't say that. You can't say that in this hearing. It's blasphemy. You can't say that. That's not that. This bill will never pass now. Good job, lawyer. But that's exactly what this bill does. I mean, this bill says that a child of any age can get reproductive care without parental consent, and it's all reproductive care. It's all reproductive care. So you can go and you can get your birth control pills. You can get all, which is essentially hormones. You can get all of that stuff without parental knowledge. Now, one of the lawmakers makes a good point in later on in this hearing, because I actually so I actually wrote it up this weekend for the in the Post Millennial, and so I watched the entire testimony. And so it's really interesting because one of the lawmakers goes on to make a good point and say, well, if a child of that age is having an abortion, then a crime has been committed. And so, police need to be notified. Like, if a child comes into Planned Parenthood and is having an abortion, Planned Parenthood has an obligation to call police to say a crime has been committed because that child has been raped. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That child has been the victim of rape. That is, unless, again, the child is the same age as the other child that they were Yeah. But in most cases, it should be a red flag to authorities to say, we need to look into this case. What happened here? Now, Senator Knoop, he raised one of the issues about a parent. So the 14th Amendment, the Supreme Court has ruled on this already. It says that they've said a parent's right to have information about their child and make healthcare decisions. Under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the court upheld a fundamental right for a parent to oversee care, custody, and control of a child. When asked that to the attorney, she basically stated that they also kind of said that right is not absolute. As long as they can, as long as the state has a legitimate public policy reasoning for interfering on that right, they can. Let's see. So Jen says you should point out the differences state to state regarding consent and abortion eligibility, or look at. Yeah, I can imagine. I know California has some really crazy laws. I know there's states across the country that after Roe v. Wade was overturned, started putting out these crazy laws that really allow anybody to consent, anybody to, some states were paying for other states to come to their state to, have an abortion there. I can imagine that each state is crazy, would depend on the difference of it. But there was one part in here that I wanted to highlight as well. So one of the questions raised about this too was this part where it says that in the state of Oregon, under the statute, it is a crime to conceal the birth of an infant, which his concern was that nobody would be held liable if a baby was born alive due to a failed abortion, and if that child was just left to die. Now, and that kind of came up because the lawyer had said that if the baby was born alive and the doctor still killed the baby, then that would be chargeable under, that'd be murder. But if it was left to die, that's a separate issue. Sorry, I have dogs. But one of the last points is that, like I said, it makes Oregon the latest sanctuary state for not only abortion, but for what is it? Minors seeking medical procedures or drugs without the consent inside the state, which would also be for a gender affirming care, as they talked about in here. And actually, it was really interesting when at one point, one of the senators, which is the co-chair of the committee, said that she claimed, and this was interesting because she claimed that surgical procedures under the age of 18 is not considered standard care, which we know are happening quite a bit across the country in gender clinics when they're having these, life-altering elective surgeries for like top surgery and everything like that. That's happening quite a bit. But then she also noted like gender affirming care is a wide spectrum, and that a child as young as 8 may get gender affirming care. That is simply supporting them for being who they are. Now, I don't think she has an idea of what she's talking about, but to admit that a child as young as 8 is allowed to get gender affirming care without the consent of their parents in the state is insane. That's basically what she was saying right there, because the whole conversation was without parental consent, that they would be able to get gender affirming care without the parents' consent. It's insane. And we know that, yeah, other states like Colorado and California have already made rules such as these. But let's see. Okay, let me see. Little Cat Feet says, completely on the fence here. I know that many of these teen pregnancies are complex. The complexity is that the family member is the father. I worked at a rape crisis center and it was common. Yeah, but if that's the case, like, you know, if you go to a rape crisis, or if you go to Planned Parenthood and you try to get an abortion without your parental, if you go to a crisis center and you're trying to get an abortion without your parental consent, and that person that is your parent, then that's an automatic flag to authorities, like I was talking about earlier. I mean, there should always be a push to go to authorities, especially when it's a minor. There should be something, at least in this bill, that says if a minor is pregnant, then authorities need to be called. Let me see. All right. So I think that's all for that one. But it's crazy because that's kind of what we're seeing across the board in a lot of these states that are they're pushing these procedures. They're allowing children to, you know, have agency over their own bodies. What you're going to start seeing next is people start pushing for the ending of the age of consent, which is absolutely wrong and insane. And the fact that you're seeing them trying to be like, yeah, so a child has agency over their own bodies. No, like they're, you know, it's not right. Children need to be children, let them grow. And even with, I mean, obviously you guys know when it comes to trans stuff, you know, you have to let a child grow. I believe in, you know, you shouldn't be allowed to transition until the age of 18, no matter what. We know parents are being manipulated and lied to. We know all of this stuff. And yes, Psycho, welcome in. Yeah. And you're right. There is no such thing as transgender kids. There shouldn't be any such thing as transgender kids. They're still trying to transition into a human that can care for themselves. Absolutely. I mean, you can't even care for yourself until you're 18. We talk about that. And except for if you get emancipated, which is a completely different topic. But the idea is that there should be no such thing as a trans kid, because what a trans kid essentially is a child who's been manipulated and not been properly taken care for by their family. And because to be trans, you transition. I don't go off this new age definition of transgender, which transgender is an umbrella term, which doesn't really mean what it's supposed to mean. So no, being a trans person means that you have gender dysphoria and you've taken the steps to transition to the opposite sex. I will always use the definition of a transsexual when I talk about what trans is. That's interesting. I didn't know. Little Cat Feet says the majority of abortions in Australia are actually done by married couples after getting disability scan. 90% of parents would choose abortion after getting scans confirming severe disability. Now, I don't agree with that. Actually, that's one of those things. I know that it can happen here. I think you can still do it here. I think it's allowed here, but I like because they do it a lot for Down syndrome. But if you are going to kill your unborn child because it has Down syndrome or any other syndrome, that's a form of eugenics. That is trying to wipe out some disabilities via basically murder. And so I don't agree with just aborting a baby because it has severe like Down syndrome or something like that. Now, if there's other issues that that it may come up with, I don't know any of the other stuff that people are aborting babies over. Now, I know that back in the day, one of the reasons why they did not, they stopped pursuing to find the gay gene, to find out if there was a marker to tell whether your child was going to be gay before they were even born, was because the fear that would be used in the same way that if you found out that your child was going to be gay before you had that child, the fear was that a lot of people would try to abort that baby, which again is another form of eugenics. I saw one that I wanted to go to. All right. Jen McMahon says, like one example in the state of Georgia, if you get pregnant by saying the father and you want to get an abortion, you need to notify one of a parent before 24 hours before getting, if you're under 18. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's funny because I live in Georgia and I'm not actually sure of the laws. I just know we have the 6-week, we have a 6-week abortion ban. So basically anything after the age, after 6 weeks, you. So yeah, get out of here. Sorry. They're not supposed to be down here. I have to go put them back upstairs in a second. Robbie says, trying and failing to find a logical reason to transition kids. All I can come up with is evil intent. Now, I agree. Like when we're talking kids, absolutely. There's no reason to do it other than to push this evil Marxist narrative, like postmodern ideology onto them. There was a point where I would have supported, with heavy gatekeeping, the transition at 16, because at the point I used to think that the detransition rate would drop off significantly after the age of 16, and especially for male to female, there would be a much higher likelihood that person would pass. But I've changed my mind on that. I think if we can get back to a place where the medical industry is actually, doing their job and doing like the best screening for these people, and they're not just like pushing people through for money, then we could get back to that. But I don't see us getting back to that place ever. Like, I am doubtful we will ever get back to that place in any time that I ever see where I would feel comfortable with anybody under the age of 18, transitioning. And I will never, ever, and this is one thing I've never supported, taking, having elective surgeries under the age of 18. In fact, when I was working on the bill here in Georgia for this, to ban surgeries and hormones, when I was pushing that bill, I was talking to legislators. I said one of the flaws that the bill had is that it was specific to gender dysphoria. I said the bill should actually apply to the young girl who wants to with body issues who wants to get breast implants at the age of 16. Like that, they should not be getting any life-altering elective surgeries before the age of 18, period. And so I would love to see more bills pop up across the country to even outlaw those surgeries. But yeah. Let's see. Referring to the current culture promoting child transition. Yeah, I think I think you hit it. It is definitely something that's evil. Again, I mean, postmodernism is evil. It is an evil ideology that seeks to destroy our culture as a whole. Oh, here we go. Miss Andrea says, I think they are trying to transition kids as a form of population control, sterilize a chunk of generation under the guise of acceptance. Yes, I agree. I've actually talked about this. I've talked about this a little bit in speeches. I think in my last speech in Pennsylvania. I think there's a little bit of eugenics to play when it comes to this ideology, right? So I think I think there is, because when you look at the high propensity for, one of these kids to have other comorbidities, one of the large ones being autism, you can see that they may be trying to sterilize those kids so that they do not reproduce, and so that they can try to wipe out some of those issues. And I think that is absolutely evil, and it's wrong. And it's, yeah. Jen says, I feel like our generation read the Communist Manifesto correctly, and this generation is reading it completely upside down. I agree. I think everybody, and this is what's interesting, because I don't read a lot of books that are for people on my side. I read books for them. And I actually, when Ariel was here, I actually showed her my copy of the Communist Manifesto and my copy of Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals and Sun Tzu, but we were reading it in a way to show exactly how the people we don't want to be like were reading, and now they're reading it in a way to, this is the goal. And I think a lot of people don't understand. I think too many people on our side of the things don't understand or have not read the Communist Manifesto. I think a lot of people think that if you read the books of the other side, then you are, it's somehow shameful because you're reading the stuff that they believe, which is actually the exact opposite. You should actually read that of your enemy. You should know how your enemy thinks. And Marxists are absolutely my enemy, but even what we're seeing now, though, and I was actually on a stream with my friend Pasta on Friday, where when I brought up Marxism, he clarified, and he was right. He said, what we're talking about when we're talking about trans stuff and this ideology is not Marx. In fact, it's cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism, which is not what Marx actually preached, which is true. So you're right. I think there is it's Marxism evolved into something even worse. But actually, Marxism as a whole, communism as a just regular communism, is purely an economic and governmental system. Whereas cultural Marxism plays into these, the postmodern aspects of society in order to push and force this system that everybody works for the greater good into play. So it's a little bit different. It's worth, checking out and making the comparisons to, it's worth mentioning the differences, because if you don't, then the people that are actually preaching this stuff, they like the actual Marxists you lose some credibility if you don't know the differences. So